Welcome to Poshtowns.
You rang, my lord.
Hello, welcome back to Turdtowns, the channel that brings you the lesser known places in the UK. But today it's an episode of Poshtowns as I investigate the second homeowner crisis in Cornwall. Recently it was reported that there's an incredible 14,000 empty properties in Cornwall, the most out of any UK county. And when I say empty, I mean that nobody lives in them full time. They're either second homes or they're rented out as holiday homes. This week it was announced that the Cornish Council will be forced to build 80,000 new homes over the next 20 years. An insane figure, which I doubt is even possible when the numbers of builders required to meet that is impossible. I wanted to use this trip as a way of trying out some new things, so therefore this list won't be in price order. Instead it's going to be in the order I actually visited the towns and villages. I also have my own agenda here because I want to make my mind up about second homes. What harm could it do for a couple of people to spend some hard-earned cash on a second home? I needed to find out. And also, is Cornwall as dead and lifeless as they say it is during the winter? Before we start, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive. Number 8. Fowey. Starting out on the Cornwall south coast is the town of Fowey with a population of 2,200. I just can't get my head around the pronunciation. Fancy dropping an entire 2 letters in a short word like that. I arrived here around 8 AM for sunrise, but the sun never really rised. Instead the place was shrouded in mist. I did take some really nice drone shots here, which unfortunately are now lost forever. You'll find out why in just a few minutes when I explain one of the worst afternoons of my life.
So today we're starting out in Fowey, which I've never been here before. So I'm quite interested to see how it is, but so far it looks like a complete ghost town. I haven't seen a single person yet.
There's a long history of pirates here. Thieves who often profited from their unethical practices were living all around here. I guess you could say not much has really changed. In modern day Fowey, fishing and tourism is the main work in the town. Set on the banks of the River Fowey and just around the headland from the sea. Fowey actually won an award this year. It was Cruise Ship Destination of the Year, beating Dubai and Kingston, Jamaica. Imagine paying for a cruise and ending up in Fowey. It's hardly exotic, is it? It's just a bit less crap than the rest of England. Dawn French and Lenny Henry used to live here, then they split up. She used to be the vicar of Fowey, but had to leave in 2021 because her cheques from the church weren't enough to afford it anymore. Yes, it is very expensive here. The people who actually work in Fowey could never afford it on their tourism wages. It's gotten so bad here that it's rumoured that only one house in the entire place with the view of the water is actually owned by a local. During the Corona crunch, house prices increased here more than 100,000 in just a year. On the plus side, Fowey was one of the most accessible places I visited on today's Posh list. Maybe they should consider building a moat to keep the riffraff out. The main street is filled with coffee shops and art galleries, perfect for the type of people who have no interest in living here full time. I actually did like the main street here though, and it felt like it was well cared for. I believe the main shop in the town is a spa, which is probably key to the rest of the town surviving. Fowey itself only has the one small beach, but it also has an aquarium and lots of history. Ultimately, it's not really any different to anywhere else in Cornwall, and therefore the house price is a rip-off. But you could argue that there's a bit more here than some Cornish seaside places. I have my mind made up though, and the town of Fowey is just okay. And that is a time where dropping 2 letters makes sense.
So we're off to Polperro now from Fowey, and we've got to get the ferry, which is pretty fun. It's something different that I haven't really done before. And it actually saves you about 20 minutes, and it only costs £6, so it's definitely worth doing.
Number 7. Polperro. Here we go then. My trip to Polperro was certainly an adventure. A terrible one. Polperro is a medieval village with a population of 572. About 100 people have left in the last 20 years. Let me just start out by saying, what happened here is not a reflection of the actual village. It was all my fault, and my hatred for this place shouldn't affect your decision to visit. But I do have one fair gripe, and that's the car park. Yeah, the car park where every single visitor is forced to park in right at the top of the hill half a mile from the village. You cannot drive in, so it's not very accessible if you're disabled, and the prices of parking will make your eyes water. I think there is some sort of horse and cart here in the summer that goes up and down the hill, but that's probably just another money grabbing attempt. My top tip is ignore the signs and find your way to the community school where you can park on the streets. The greed at the car park from the owner is disgusting, so make sure not to use the car park. Now admittedly, this is done because Polperro consists of extremely narrow lanes. You might get down there, but you aren't going to be able to turn back around. so no cars, which makes it quite inconvenient living here. The village itself is squashed around a harbour. It's your quintessential Cornish fishing village. Almost every building around the harbour looks to be a holiday cottage. You can tell that as each building has its own sign for visitors. Imagine working in the harbour as a fisherman all your life, but you're not allowed to actually live here. Smarmy London types limp around the harbour, happily breathing in the smell of their excretion, whilst desperate and exhausted tourists pant and wheeze their way up and down the steep hill. The village is home to Richard and Judy, who I completely forgot existed, and I haven't heard their name since childhood. I was fairly enjoying my visit here until I managed to crash my drone due to a seagull, and then everything just unravelled from there. After spending an hour walking around back and forth in Polperro trying to calculate on the map whose garden the drone was actually in, it turned out to be in a holiday let. And I'm not condoning anything I'm about to say, I did this all out of desperation, this was not the right thing to do. But as this is Cornwall in the winter, the holiday home was empty. So I went in their garden. Then it turned out it was actually up a cliff behind their garden in some sort of no man's land which nobody owned. It turned out that the drone was perched 30 metres up in the air in a tree. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I spent the next 2 hours trying to get that damn thing down. I threw so many things that my muscles ached the next day. I felt like I'd done a gym session. It was a complete joke. Personally, I find defeat hard to accept. I can brute force my way out of most situations, but now was not one of those times, and I was forced to accept defeat.
Honestly, fuck Polperro. I do not recommend scrambling through the back gardens of Polperro. It's like going up a cliff face. Look at it. So my drone is now gone. I'm covered in fox piss, badger shit, whatever. The day's done. No more of this. I'll pick it up again tomorrow. And I'll have to buy a new drone too. There is no getting that drone back. It's going to take gale force winds to knock it out of the tree. I am dying for some water. It's somehow like 15 degrees today, and I've been throwing pine cones for the last hour at a tree. Fuck my life. And as it turns out, I've left my wallet in my car, right at the top of the mountain. So no drink for me until I do it. I'm dying. It's the worst day ever. Never coming to Polperro again.
On my way back up the hill, I was so thirsty I was contemplating drinking from a river. But I already had a new drone to pay for. I didn't like the thought of paying for a private hospital for E. coli, or perhaps worse, the toilet runoff from the car park drained down the river to save the owner the cost of the sewerage. Polperro, whilst nice, is a rip-off to visit and a rip-off to live here, and an average house price is 680,000, so just don't bother.
What an abortion of a day that was. You know, I say it's an abortion like it's a joke, but I honestly had to abort the mission, so abortion is an appropriate word for that situation. Because this was the day from hell. You know, I have a lot of time on my own to think during making these videos, and today I just couldn't help but think, fuck me, it's not worth it, is it? Like, I truly believe that people who work hard in life should be rewarded for stuff, and that is a mantra that I've tried to live by. Like, nobody will ever outwork me. That's a fact. You try it. But today was my breaking point officially. Like, damn. Take this, right? It was just unravelling in front of my eyes, one thing after another. So the drone's in the air above Polperro. Then a seagull comes, so I get distracted, and then the drone hits a tree. So then I think, okay, that's fine, I'll go get the drone. Turns out it's in some holiday cottages, back garden, / it wasn't a back garden, it was just a random plot of land, like wasteland on the edge of a cliff. So I'm there trespassing, minding my own business, you know, climbing up this cliff casually, and I kind of got to the point where it was actually getting a bit dangerous, so I had to put my bag down, I had to leave some stuff behind and hide it in a hedge as I scramble up this hedge, getting absolutely battered by brambles. Like my arms are fucked now. It was at this point I was just thinking, I better get the drone back after all this. And I can hear the drone calling me, it's beeping, but I still can't see it. And then I look up and it's 40 foot up in the air, isn't it? It's stuck up a tree. So then I managed to spend the next 2 hours throwing acorns at a drone in a tree while I'm trespassing. Great, what a lovely day that must have been. And the whole time, I haven't had water in about 4 hours. My car is at the top of Polperro Hill, it's miles away. Then I realise My wallet isn't with me either, that's also in the car, so water is out of the question. So my situation is, I can either continue throwing acorns at this drone in the tree, or I can perhaps try to climb the tree, and I start doing that, and I'm desperately trying to shake the branches and hope the drone falls out the tree. And then a moment flashed before my eyes and I thought, I could die here. Like, this is actually pretty risky. I am on a steep cliff, tree miles up in the air right now. If I slip just once, game over for me. And was it really worth it just to retrieve a drone? So I came back down, continued throwing acorns for about 20 minutes, and that's when I just lost it. I had to take a look at my life at this point in time. I'm a grown-ass man, and I'm sat here throwing acorns up at a tree. Through sticks too. Like some 13-year-old kiddie would do. What has my life become for? So I give up on that because I think, oh, it's fine. I guess I'll buy a new drone. I've only taken footage of 2 places. It's not a massive loss. I mean, it's quite an expensive drone, but I'll eat the loss for my own stupidity. And I start setting off back down the hill. And of course, I managed to fall down this cliff and land on my knee. My knee's fucked now. That's great fun, by the way. I push through all the brambles, make it back into Polperro village. Dying, I need a drink bad at this point, but no, I've got to walk up a hill like that. It's just a horrible day, horrible. My clothes are ripped, I'm covered in mud, I stink of fox piss.
Number 6, Helford. Don't let the name put you off, this place is far from hell. It's a village with a population of over 50 people.
Alright, so surprisingly, I haven't given up and I'm back, and we're now in Helford, which has an average house price of 900,000.
What a weird place. It was one of the most eerie places I've ever been. Nice, but completely empty. It took me 10 minutes to find another human being, and that was just a tradesman.
Ghostly as all hell round here. I seen one person who was a tradesman, and apart from that there's no one about. Dead. Eerie, in fact.
It's a tiny place centred around a river which you can drive through, or you can just not because there's an easy road around it. Somehow this tiny place has its own shop and a pub. It was listed in the top 20 most beautiful places in England. The price tag to live here though is an average of 900,000, although to be fair most of the houses are large, and it's not the sort of place that Cornish people should have the right to live in because there's such limited housing anyway.
Wow, a working payphone. I can't remember last time I've seen one of them, but I guess you got to in these sort of isolated communities.
The houses that were here were either holiday cottages or big houses that were being made to be even more expensive. It's incredibly isolated here. The nearest town is Helston, a 25-minute drive away. There isn't really a whole lot to see or do in the village itself. It is on the Lizard, which is a nice area, so it seems to be a perfect place to just wait to die. And in that case, it lives up to its name.
Okay, next up we've got St Mawes, which is the most expensive place in Cornwall, but it's only a 29-mile drive. It shouldn't take too long. An hour and 12 minutes.
On to our second ferry crossing of the trip to get over to St Mawes, and this one's a bit more expensive at £7.50, but again it saves you quite a lot of driving time.
Number 5, St Mawes. Here we go then, this is Cornwall's answer to Salcombe in Devon. This village of 644 is the most expensive place to buy in Cornwall, with an average of 1.5 million. It is apparently Britain's answer to the French Riviera. It was just fine, I don't think the price was justified. I'm not sure if it was the weather, but it actually seemed a little bit on the gloomy side here.
I don't think St Mawes is even that nice. I've been to far nicer places. I don't think the price is justified here.
They were in the process of resurfacing the entire main road, which was causing chaos, although I was in a complete shock to see actual roadwork going on where they weren't just filling in potholes. I guess money talks when you're in the richest place in Cornwall. Think about it, how is this road a priority but others aren't? For the size of the place, it does have more than one shop, and I could imagine there would be a decent community here if it wasn't for all the second homes. Although I was quickly learning that it's actually a bit of a myth that lots of the shops close down entirely in the winter. It was more like the odd cafe or pub closes down. The houses here were massive and impressive, and that's very fitting because the royal family are huge fans of St Mawes. Also, the owner of Aston Martin and then Hotel Inspector Alex Polizzi are too. And you just can't get much posher than that bunch. It's even more isolated than Helford, and you're even forced to take a ferry to save you time, which I had to do twice. It's about 40 minutes to the city of Truro. Alternatively, the town of Falmouth is on the other side of the river 1 mile away. Fortunately, there's a ferry during the day, but if you miss that, it's going to take you an hour to drive around the river to Falmouth. That must be frustrating when it looks so close by. Despite its isolation, it's been described as hell on earth during the busy summer months here. The competition for housing is fierce. A couple of years ago, a former council house sold for 1.9 million? That really is a kick in the teeth to Cornish people. This is the sort of thing that really frustrates me. Perhaps in the future, second homeowners here should be forced to also pay for the build of a new affordable home. If you can afford a house in St Mawes, you'll be able to afford to pay for a first-time buyer's home construction. It's kind of irrelevant anyway. This place is too far gone, and it's been known as the second homeowner's paradise for as long as I can remember.
As you walk around St Mawes, you can't help but wonder what some of these people had to do to afford the places that they have now. How hard did they work? How much did they have to study? What sacrifices did they have to make? Or did they in fact not make any of those and it was just luck? We all work really hard for our money and each generation is adamant they work harder than the last. Ultimately it just comes down to luck, doesn't it? Being in the right place at the right time. That's how a lot of wealth is generated. And maybe once this country finds its way out of this mess that we're in, there will be another opportunity for people from my generation to step up. But until then, we can only look at places like St Mawes with envy, because we got no chance.
It's nice, but I'm pretty sure I won't ever be coming back. Once a year, there's a famous event here where rich people chase the peasant tourists into the sea with shotguns and force them to swim over to Falmouth. This is viewed as a positive event to the rich people because A, it saves on the pollution of driving to Falmouth, and B, it gets the poor people out of their village. Number 4, St Ives. Finally, heading up to the north coast of Cornwall. The most famous place on today's list, and also the one that I'm probably most qualified to talk about, because I've had a lot of holidays here in and around St Ives.
Alright, so we're now in St Ives, which is a well-known place. It's got the lowest average house price on today's list, but the place is bigger than all the other places, and naturally, as it's a bigger place, it's got some cheaper areas too, but it's still got a very high average house price for the size of the place when you factor that in.
Despite the average price being the cheapest at $469,000, St Ives is far bigger than the other entries on today's list, and it has a population of 10,000. I also kinda had to include it as it's probably the most famous posh place in Cornwall. St Ives is lovely, and there's also a lot to do here. I would honestly recommend it for a visit if you're coming to Cornwall. Just be aware that it does get insanely busy in the summer. St Ives receives around 750,000 visitors each year. You're best off not even attempting to drive in during the summer and instead take the train, which acts like a sort of park and ride service. Even in the winter there was quite a lot of tourists here and I struggled with parking. St Ives is most certainly a place on the tourist map. Due to how busy it gets here, I've often thought about actually staying in the town. Then I had to have a rethink when I saw the prices. Almost every single house around the water is a holiday cottage. These former fishermen's cottages are no longer occupied by the locals.
Yeah, I mean, the holiday homes are everywhere along here. Former fishermen's cottages. Now every single door has a key lock in it, the key safe. And really this should be where the younger people are living. Sadly, no more.
It was actually disgusting to see how many had been taken over. I was starting to get angry again. This is the sort of place people should be able to live and work.
So here on this hilly road, not a single house was lived in. Every single one was a holiday let. You could tell because they all had the key boxes. Madness, because they aren't particularly amazing looking houses. They're just located fairly near the sea in St Ives. And that's the main selling point. Ridiculous.
I was strapped for time. I took a quick look at the high street, which seemed to be thriving with its many art galleries and tourist shops. It was actually recently named in the top 32 UK high streets. And then I had to come in because my time was up. I've been here a lot, so I didn't really need any longer here. I love St Ives, and I just feel sorry for the young people with no hope of actually buying a house here. The population has already shrunk by 1,000 people over the last 2 decades.
Alright, we're really fighting the time here, but I have just managed to make it to the 5th place. We've got 3 places all bunched up, but I don't think I'm going to make it to Padstow, so we might have to stick to 7 towns rather than 8 today, which is a bit frustrating, but you never know.
Number 3, Rock. Things were getting complicated as I entered the St Minver Lowlands. I was quickly running out of daylight with only a couple of hours left to complete this list. To any Americans watching, winter daylight is pretty short in the UK. The issues from the previous day were now causing me havoc. Rock is a village with a population of 1,100 and an average house price of 800,000.
So this is Rock, and really interesting actually. This is the area with the most second homes in Cornwall. This area's got 71% of houses here being second homes, which is almost 3/4 of the entire place, which is absolutely madness. And you've probably heard the recent report that second homeowners in Cornwall are going to be charged 100% council tax on second properties. Well, despite that, a report was released a couple of weeks ago saying that second home ownership is still on the rise in this area.
This place just lives for its high-class tourism and has been dubbed Kensington of Cornwall and Chelsea-on-Sea. The upstanding member of society Mohammed Al-Fayed often visited here, and Gordon Ramsay lives here too.
Right, we're outside Gordon Ramsay's house. He seems to be home, so good to see he's not a second home owner. Probably is.
Rock is essentially just a small place with modern buildings and huge mansions. There isn't really much to see, and there isn't much in the way of shopping, although it has a very flash-looking pub. It has a golf course too, because what kind of posh place wouldn't? Rock is joined on by another village ironically named Pity Me. Ironic, because that's the last thing people living around here need. The second home ownership in this area is out of control. But somehow, it was going to get even worse in this video. Recently they built a collection of shacks up the hill which were designated for local people only, so I guess that's something. Rock is a dead end with a beach and a ferry across to Padstow, and given my lack of daylight hours left, this was very useful. It's a place to stay without much to do.
Alright, so we're taking a risk. We're getting the ferry boat over to Padstow, which is town number 7 on our list today. It's not the most expensive of the towns. It's not the most second homes of the towns either. But I think I'm autistic and I like to do 8 towns. 8 is the special number. But we're taking a ferry over, which is pretty interesting. Taking a bit of a risk here. Apparently we can get back to Rock today. We're not going to miss the last ferry, so hopefully it all goes well.
Number 2, Padstow. Padstow is a small town with a population of 2,600 and with an average house price of 666,000. I guess we're slumming it at this point. I'd never been here before, and I wouldn't get long here either as I was desperate to catch the last ferry back to my car and not get stranded. Padstow didn't feel particularly posh, but it was nice. If I had to live somewhere from this list, I would probably pick here. It had more going on and a nice atmosphere. It also looked like there were lots of working people here, with the National Lobster Hatchery right in the middle of the town. It does have a beach, but it's around the headland. There's a popular cycle track here too called the Camel Way, which is built on the old railway and has around 400,000 visitors each year. The town has also been known as Padstow, as Rick Stein owns several businesses in the town. Historical facts. I do like to give you them from time to time, but Padstow was actually bombed during the Blitz of World War II. You really wouldn't expect that here. There is some social housing at the top of the town though, fortunately for me. And also fortunate they're not being sold off for £1 million, which is good, because there's clearly still some working people here. Padstow probably had the best balance from what I saw from everywhere I've been on this trip.
Do you know what? It reminds me of a posh Brixham here. Brixham in Devon. Like, it's got the harbour, it's all close together. Quite atmospheric as the sun goes down. Doesn't feel particularly posh though. But what I will say is the high street looked very good. None of the units were empty. So whatever Padstow's doing, it must be doing it right. Back on the ferry now. Let's hope that he hasn't left me stranded. Otherwise it's game over.
He hadn't left me stranded, and it was off to the final place. Number 1, Polperro. Although Polperro is not the most expensive place on today's list, it does have the most second homes, and it certainly felt posh. The average house price here is £1 million. Polperro has a population of 1,500. Although the sun had deserted me at this point, I was still infuriated looking around. Almost 3/4 of the place was empty, and the locals just not allowed to join this club. You can just see the London influence here too, as the church is called the Tube Station. Another reason to hate Polperro is that David Cameron loves this place and regularly holidayed here. Legend has it that you can still hear the squeals of the Polperro pigs. The lack of sun actually made it easier to spot the second homes. I felt like I'd broken into a closed down resort. The houses were huge, the bay and the beach were impressive, and still somehow there was a shop open here. This beach really reminded me of holidays from my past, and it was still nice just being here even though it was freezing cold in January. But on the subject of the beach, this beach has seen some things. In 2022, the police actually had to impose a 10 PM curfew on the beach because the children of the millionaires were using it as a party spot. It got so out of hand that the beach was littered with drink and drug paraphernalia. The headmaster of the local school told them that they were all being really, really bad, and if they didn't behave, Daddy would stop adding to their trust funds. Across the water is New Polsef, and this is where I really felt like ripping all the doors off and telling the local Cornish people come be happy and live. This entire settlement was pitch black and there weren't streetlights either. It was one of the strangest places I've ever been. There were houses for sale here though, so now's your chance.
Alright, who's ready for a recurring segment? If you've got a house problem, I can help you, whether you bought or sold. It's right mode.
Alright, we have a one room above a garage here. It's described as a chalet, but it's not like any other chalet you've ever seen. It's described as having countryside glimpses, and glimpses is right. You'd be lucky to see anything with a pub right smack bang in front of you. Have you ever dreamt of owning a room above a garage which hasn't been touched since it was built? Here we have the original plywood rafters and blood red tiles from the 80s. We got not one but 2 bedrooms and not one but 2 bathrooms, which is somehow more than my own house, and I don't live in a garage, but you can for the incredible price of only $650,000. There is no garden, but you won't be needing one with the Cornish countryside right on your doorstep. There's only one way to describe this, and it's not a chalet, it's right mould. In the original Enid Blyton novel, the children were disappointed that they wouldn't be able to take their usual holiday to Polsef. Well, that was in the 1940s, and they sure as hell wouldn't take their holidays here now, because this place is soulless and dead. You'd have more fun just staring up at the night sky, which is actually brighter than the non-existent lights of Polsef.
Well, that's that really. It's been quite an adventure. It's been a bit more chaotic than usual episode of Turdtowns, but Poshtowns is where it's at apparently. I do feel like this trip has kind of changed my opinion on things when it comes to second homes. I used to not be so bothered. I thought, well, if someone works hard for something, why shouldn't they be able to spend their money how they want? I've kind of changed my mind now in respect of, I think people should be maybe allowed one other home, but going past that point is just greed. And the poor Cornish people just have to get separated from their families and move up country, as they like to say. And it's just not right. Something has to change here. And the government are absolutely shafting you all still, because charging 100% council tax on a second home in Cornwall ain't gonna do a thing. Because these people are just so damn rich that it's not going to affect them. They can afford it. If they can afford a nice house here, they can afford the council tax on it, I promise you. So it's not enough. I like to think about my situation. I'm not exactly struggling, but I'm not well off either. Because ultimately, most of you will be in the middle section, and it's you who's getting shafted right now. I'm sure you're nodding your heads in agreement with what I'm saying. But there is such a huge jump now. The people who are earning 50k and having to pay extra tax are in the same bracket as people who are earning a lot more. And that isn't right, because 50k is nothing nowadays. Like, I used to think growing up, I was like, oh, if I earn 50k, yeah, I'm a successful man. No, you're not. You can probably survive, but is it really living? So I do think things need to change here. I'm not sure quite what I would do. I mean, Cornwall trying to build 80,000 new homes is optimistic, to say the least. They might build a few, but they ain't going to get anywhere near 80,000. And think of all the communities that are going to be decimated by this house building. Cornwall's a pretty empty country. I don't know why they just don't build some new towns. That would work better in my opinion. But I'm not a planner, I'm just an idiot, so I wouldn't know any better. But this country has some fundamental problems, and second houses are just the tip of the iceberg, aren't they? So really, when I think about the places in Cornwall that I've seen today, all it reminds me of is what these people did to get these homes. Was it honest? Were they good people? And in most cases, the answer would be no. And I know what you're thinking as well. Some of you are probably thinking, oh, he's just jealous. I am bloody jealous. I am bloody jealous, because it would be so nice not to have to worry about things. But it's only going to get worse, isn't it? I grew up so proud of this country, I really did. My pride is completely evaporated. The gulf in wealth in this country is absurd. Let's be honest, the majority of the people who have this wealth have done something dodgy in their past. I've never known an executive who hasn't screwed anyone over. So think of all the rich people who have done shady things. And we idolise them. I mean, we're told that our whole life should be about trying to make as much money as possible. But the majority of people who have a lot of money didn't get it honestly. There might be some of you watching that did, and I apologise to group you in with those people. But this country is idolising the wrong sort of people. We idolise footballers, we idolise rappers, we idolise OnlyFans stars now. I mean, what has this country come to? None of these people have a single bit of talent in their heads. But yet we're idolising and trying to be like them. We should be idolising the doctors, the engineers, Do you think people like China are doing things like OnlyFans? No, they're talking about their engineers, and that's what we need to do here. We need to start looking forward for this country, looking at actual talent. And maybe if we can do that, more people will have a share of the wealth. But for now, we idolise scum in this country.
And that is Poshtowns Cornwall done. I'm gearing up for Turdtowns now, but as I haven't done one of those for a while, I wanted to use this trip as an opportunity to test some things out in a stress-free environment. Turns out it wasn't stress-free, but of course I'm dying to know what you think should be done about the second homes of Cornwall. Do you think the extra council tax is effective, or does something else need to be done? Do the Cornish people have the right to live where they grew up? This trip certainly opened my eyes and changed my mind around. I now think the damage is done to a lot of these communities, but to protect other places, second homes need a much higher tax. And there also needs to be a focus on building affordable homes in the devastated communities. That's my opinion, but I want to hear yours. And don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive.